So, hi, my name is Fern. I'm taking Child and Youth Care Practitioner at Centennial College. We have subject called Evidence-Based Practice 1, and we are assigned to interview and to gather information explaining real-world practices related to evidence-based practice. Before we start, I just want to let you know that this conversation is for college assignment purposes only. Okay. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Paolo Sacchetti. I'm the teacher here at the St. Florence Interphase Day Treatment Program, and it's located in the Toronto Catholic District School Board at St. Florence Elementary School.
Okay, so first question. What is your philosophy related to evidence-based practice?
So evidence-based practice, in my experience, is grounded in the scientific method, and it's grounded in what's going to give you kind of results for certain things. There's a lot of philosophies that are out there that you can kind of just make up whatever you want on the spot, but unless you have things to look at, quantitative data as well as qualitative data, what you say doesn't really hold a lot of water, right? So the reason why evidence-based practice is so important, especially in my field, is that not only can you use that to better specifically identify any areas that you want to focus on or to become a more competent educator, it also is going to inform you as to what practices might not work, which is probably more important than finding what practices work, especially in the realm of educators where it's such a flexible position. There are a lot of different ways to do things. Some ways may not be right for others, and you can use evidence-based practice to find out and kind of walk through that whole, I like to call it a swamp sometimes.
Okay, thank you. Second question, do you currently use any specific evidence-based programs? If so, what are they?
Yeah, so a couple of evidence-based programs that I've used and kind of have tinkered with in the past. One of them is called the Brigance Diagnostic Assessments, and I predominantly use those diagnostic assessments for when students first come to me because it helps to give me an idea of where they're at academically, and there's also some other areas that I can identify as well, such as ability to focus, attention span, things like that. So based on using that when a student first arrives to my program, I can then use those same diagnostics at the end of a student's stay or at certain points throughout the school year to get some feedback in terms of, is what I am teaching this student working? And my evidence is based on the results of the diagnostic assessments. Another diagnostic assessment tool that I use, not really a diagnostic assessment, more of an evidence-based practice. I use a classroom management tool called Class Dojo. And what it does, it basically rewards students with points for following expectations, meeting certain behaviors in the class, and things like that. And what I use that for throughout the week is that's kind of my barometer for how students are doing. My particular program is a little trickier because my students are mostly a trauma background. So being able to look at a student's achievements throughout the week, you can kind of see any patterns, or you can kind of use that to show to the student, say, hey, listen, like, what a great week you're having, right? And the student, when they see that, they internalize that, and that's suddenly a positive reinforcement mechanism to help themselves see their own evidence-based process and progress through the classroom.
Okay. So for related evidence-based practice, what skills and or practices do clinicians need to have to be effective?
Well, for teachers, first off, you've got to have some flexibility. Not every evidence-based practice is going to work. There's no kind of one-size-fits-all method. Another thing you need to do is you need to be able to look at a set of data if you're trying to put some kind of evidence-based approach into it, being able to read it and being able to interpret it. Okay, what's happening here? What is going well about this particular process or thing that I'm using, and what are any areas that I can continue to work on? So it's a bit of a gray area, I like to say. There's a lot of like soft skills that you need. You need to be able to interpret data. You need to be able to communicate that effectively, especially if you're working in an environment like I am, where I have a CYW or multiple other staff. That way, your ability to communicate it results in a more cohesive unit because other people are going to be able to see the evidence or to see any maybe patterns that they notice as well. So you get their input. That also helps with the process too.
Okay, so fourth question, what is the value of using evidence-informed approaches in our work with children and youth?
I think evidence-informed approaches is everything, right? Because children and youth are the most important kind of, I like to call it an asset or the resource for the future, right? So across the board, not just in my specific program, but just in education in general, there are lots of ideas out there as to how students learn best, just for random examples, or how students function best in a classroom setting. But if you just say that and you don't really have any kind of figures to back that up, then we're just saying stuff, right? So being able to present the information or to at least track it, even for your own kind of informed approach, that goes miles ahead instead of just kind of wandering through a fog and be like, well, is this working? Kind of feels like it's working. Well, evidence-informed approach doesn't really care about your feelings, right? And just looks for what are the results, what's working, what are the numbers, and then how can we fix that moving forward, especially when it comes to children and youth in the education system.
Okay. And fifth question, what are your plans for the long term, like 3 to 5 years, related to evidence-based practices?
So my plan is I usually try to get as much reading as I can. I try and be well read as to different approaches. I'm reading a couple books right now on some evidence-based approach. Some of it actually I first discovered it way back in Teachers College, and I'm kind of just revisiting to see either if it holds true or if it actually maybe not doesn't hold true anymore in my particular role. I also try and expand it to use more technology in terms of evidence-based approach, because I find that's a much better collector tool of information and evidence, and it's a much easier way of kind of presenting the evidence as well. Especially if you see or notice a pattern in whatever it is that you're looking to do, you can present that information way more effectively, and you can reach, I think, way more people.
Okay, thank you. And last one, what advices would you give me or someone just starting out who wants to grow as an evidence-based practitioner?
Okay, I would say for you is to always try stuff.
Okay.
Be willing to try, be willing to fail, because failure is a lot.
Sure.
I failed a whole bunch at the beginning of my teaching career. I tried a lot of different stuff too, and some of those failed spectacularly, let me tell you. Boy, did I have some lessons and some approaches to teaching that just didn't work out. And the ability to look at the evidence and say, okay, this is not working, to have that humility to also realize, like, yeah, I messed up in here, that's only going to help you.
Okay.
And there might be some approaches that you don't like, which is why I always say to try a lot of different approaches, especially ones that are based in evidence, because you may like some that may be effective, you may not like some that are still also effective, but that may not particularly fit into your teaching style or your style itself or your personality. So I always say, don't be worried. Oh, great. The bell is on. Perfect. I always say, don't be afraid of failing. Try lots of different things and never stop learning.
Okay, sure. So, thank you so much for meeting with me today. It was such a pleasure to learn more about your work related to evidence-based. Your work with children is such as an inspiration to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.